Too nostalgic to be the worst. Too many flaws to be the best. I might have to be the one to go on sabbatical, honey, after people probably see this review because I feel like maybe, just maybe, we could be gassing up the Marvel Legends No Way Home Green Goblin here, which is probably one of the most anticipated Marvel Legends in some time because it's awfully strange. I don't know if it was a licensing thing. It most undoubtedly was a licensing thing, especially on the Spidey Man. But when it comes to Green Goblin, it's a little precarious that we didn't get a proper Marvel Legends figure for him ever since the release of the film, almost a whopping 2 years later. So we finally have our Green Goblin from No Way Home, specifically the ending scene where he's got the upgraded suit. He's got all the little nuances, modifications, kerfuffle all throughout the suit, and with the exposed head and the goggles. And so this made it on a lot of people's lists, myself included. And despite how vocal I've been in my stance against Marvel Legends, yeah, I'll be the first to admit, I was very much there in terms of anticipation, seeing that they were revealing not only Doc Ock, but also Green Goblin, all three of my boys, the Spidey Men, which are on their way, and then also a couple of other extra figures on the side, Sandman, MJ, even Matt Murdock himself. But Green Goblin, as far as a package deal, was pretty interesting. And for the most part, I feel like that package deal does a serviceable job of delivering what we were really expecting, but I do feel like maybe it's time to take off those nostalgia glasses. Because in the 6-inch format, I can see so many different strengths that Marvel Legends was able to nail. And as far as sculpting, for the most part, they're doing an adequate job. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of this kind of suit. I'm more so leaning towards the classic Power Ranger-esque Green Goblin suit where he doesn't have the modifications. It's just a straightforward Green Goblin suit. And as far as lifting the little modifications that he put on his suit, Marvel Legends did, like I said, a pretty adequate job. You can see an awful lot of the purple straps and then the brown straps, the buckles, the bit that's right here attached to the chest, wrapping itself around, kind of mimicking a little bit of that comic-inspired look. But then you have the actual holstered, clipped buckle right here and the belt around the waist, as well as the strap kind of cutting diagonally down to this bag that is likely holding his pumpkin bombs. And then we see something that I've never been a huge fan of design-wise, but that's mostly on the Green Goblin concept art, or at least the design that they decided to go with in the movie. So this is not in any way, shape, or form a flack on Marvel Legends. They were just trying to replicate what they saw on screen, which are these, like, it almost feels like Norman just took, or at least Green Goblin, not necessarily Norman because he's not exactly conscious at this point, he just took spare parts from like the glider or whatever, kind of just jumped with them in between dimensions and strapped them onto his limbs. And you see an awful lot of that here on the thighs, the gauntlets, and then the knees and the shins. It just looks like stuff was just kind of grafted on there. And Marvel Legends pretty much just straight up did that, along with some decent texture work. And to me, I think the strongest form of paint that, I don't think it's even paint, I think this is naturally how the plastic is colored, is the neon reflective green that makes up the suit. So overall, as far as paint and detail, they did an adequate job. The only things that stand out to me as slight inconveniences would have to be an awful lot of the rubberized pieces that do feel a little bit on the flimsy side, specifically the missiles on the right gauntlets that don't feel too bad, but it's once we get to everything that's pretty much happening on the left forearm, specifically the protruding knives and the missiles here on the top are a little wonky and warped, at least mine, coming right directly out of that package. So overall, they're decent, but a very easy touch to just kind of have them be bent and warped, so do be careful with that. But that all pales in comparison to something that is just fundamentally there that I just don't think they really had to go for. And that is that pudgy belly. I understand that Norman, along with Willem Dafoe himself, is in his 60s. He's not exactly the young person or the younger middle-aged Norman Osborn that he was in the first Tobey Maguire movie, but at the same time, dude is still pretty athletic. He even mentioned in interviews that he went back to doing athleticism, acrobatics, working out to make sure that he was fit for some of the fight sequences in No Way Home. So why give him like this beer belly? Is it just me, or does it look like Marvel Legends went for like this pudgy belly kind of aesthetic happening here in the mid-torso. I'm sorry, but I just take a little bit of umbrage with that, and it just looks kind of ugly to me. I wish that they would have gone for a slightly slimmer design, and I'm trying to figure out if maybe it's attributed to the busy work that's happening with the belt and the strap and the cargo stuff and the purple garments, but no, I mean, look closely and you'll notice that that's just exactly how they sculpted out the suit. So, I don't know, what gives on that, Marvel Legends? At least they were more or less able to make up for that by giving us a awesome Willem Dafoe head sculpt, at least on the conceptual side of things, because right out of the package, he comes adorned with the purple hood and the goggles. And so from surface value, you can see right here that he looks pretty menacing and awesome, just like he did in that final battle with the hood right here that is kind of lifting itself a little bit too high, but once you kind of mold it with your fingers and press it down, it fits a little bit more snug and tight to the round side of the head here at the top, and overall it looks pretty decently. But of course, most of us want to look at the classic Willem Dafoe head sculpt. In order to be able to do that, you pretty much need to remove the goggles and the hood by taking off the head, popping it off of its socket, and doing so will allow the head to fully come out of the hood right there. Remove the goggles by, in my opinion, more easily to do by pressing downwards instead of upwards, because then you're gonna come into contact with the hair, which is decently sculpted, except the seam is a little bit too obvious here at the top, and I feel like mine was glued a little too high up that it's giving him just a little bit of added forehead. A little bit more so than I would have desired, but at least the head sculpt is in fact there, and it's pretty nice. You see the eyes, the grin, even the gap in between the teeth that is iconic for Willem Dafoe. So overall, a very decent head sculpt. I just think that a lot of people are saying that this is like one of the greatest Marvel Legend head sculpts of all time. Frankly, I feel like I've seen a little bit done better, whether it be back in the Toy Biz days, or if we are to think of much more contemporary examples, some of those boxed up Disney Plus stuff, I would argue, looks pretty decent. Say what you want about some of those. Hell, I damn near hated this show, but that Marvel Legends Disney Plus She-Hulk is actually legit. I actually do like that head sculpt, that overall figure, even though I didn't pick it up. I've seen it in store in person, and I'm like, yo, that actually looks legitimately. Granted, it's not that difficult to do when your entire character is made out of CG, but it was still a very awesome looking Marvel Legends toy. And here, it's a pretty good head sculpt and likeness to Willem Dafoe. I definitely see Willem Dafoe here, but two things, or I would say three things, is that sure, an awful lot of the texture work and skin tone is very adequately made, but it still looks kind of like a caricature of Willem Dafoe rather than Willem Dafoe straight up himself. Like I said, my unit felt like it was having the headpiece glued on, or at least the hairpiece glued on a little too high to give him a little bit too much forehead for my liking. And then as I kind of moved the head about, I noticed that mine did come with a bit of a paint scuff right underneath the right eyebrow. So that definitely rubbed me the wrong way. A little bit of a pun intended there. But at least it's still good. I still recognize this as a good head sculpt. I would just say that definitely check on your figures, especially since Green Goblins come in a windowless packaging. But at least, unlike the others with all that paper baggies that you have to kind of undo, he came in like a plastic kind of encasing that you have to open up with like these little like cupboard style box that you have to open up from the middle. So I thought that was kind of cute and very organized. So I thought it was pretty decent that Marvel Legends went through the trouble of doing that. But it's still a windowless packaging nonetheless. So definitely double check on your Green Goblin order to make sure that you didn't get scammed out. Now, I guess while I have his head removed, I want to tackle just at least a couple of accessories before we get to the biggie. First one is, of course, the most iconic pumpkin bomb. He only comes with one, and frankly, that's okay, because if it's of this size, it's very easy to lose or even swallow. Honestly, this is one of the most swallowable accessories I've ever reviewed on the channel. Dear God, it almost resembles that of an orange pea, but it is in fact the pumpkin bomb. Is simply just an orange plastic ball with the green light or the green paint there in the middle to make sure that you're actually getting a pumpkin bomb. Aside from that, detail and paint could have been just a little better, but again, I'm nitpicking at this point. We then get the alternate head sculpt, which is going to be the iconic Green Goblin mask. And you can see it sculpted in the exact same green plastic that is made up of the suit. So that was definitely the right way to go, as opposed to just painting on an average form of white plastic or black plastic and then painting over it, because that could have spelled disaster, McFarlane, right? One of my few major criticisms for them, but at least Marvel Legends were able to do it right. And overall, the sculpting and the paint applications they were able to give, especially for the middle part of the mouth here for the black, the silver on the teeth, and the gold on the eyes, is pretty awesome. It does look like his cheekbones are just a little on the high side, but overall, you can see right here that with the scale that they had working with, this is a really, really awesome representation of that classic Sam Raimi Green Goblin mask, and overall, I could not be any more happy with it. I just wish that there was a little bit of a better function with this mask, aside from maybe holding it in his hand, because you're probably thinking, well, David, you can pop it on. He's got the hole right underneath that fits perfectly on the neck stump. But the problem is that there was no alternate neck piece to swap it out with. They didn't account for the exposed neck when you remove the hood. So you can guess what happens here. Popping the Green Goblin mask on then gives us this. From the front, looks awesome, right? Pretty awesome, pretty cool. He still has the purple garment here around the neck, but no matter, he's donning the classic Green Goblin Sam Raimi mask. Once you rotate it around, however, exposed neck. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that kind of bothers me a little bit. It's just one of those things that just sticks out to me like a sore thumb. So you're probably wondering, can you maybe put on the hood so you can go for this like mesh of the Sam Raimi with the classic comic look of having the purple hood over the mask, kind of like he did in some of those older comics? Obviously not, because you're going to have this part of the plastic protruding out. It does not fit into the purple hood whatsoever. So it's either one or the other. You either have the Norman head or the Green Goblin mask, but with the Green Goblin mask, you have the exposed neck. So it kind of renders, at least for me, the mask a little moot. So despite looking kind of cool from the front, posability is going to be a little bit limited as far as not trying to break any of that immersion due to the exposed neck. So if you're going to do it, you might as well put the Norman head back on. Pops right into place. And you can see right here that he technically has a much more natural look to him when he does have the Norman head. And like I mentioned before, if you're going to be putting on that alternate mask head, you better have him be facing forward so that you're able to kind of cover up a little bit of the neck stump. Otherwise, moving the head around is going to expose the neck, which then brings us to the articulation. Obviously, due to the swappable nature of the head, you're able to definitely rotate it 360 degrees. That goes for the mask head as well. They're both able to turn all the way around as well as tilt very generously towards the top and towards the bottom, just as far as the Marvel Legends can typically do, and even some slight tilting side to side that you can kind of make out a little bit right there. Arms are able to rotate towards the top side vertically, almost 360 degrees, just mine the purple garment around the shoulders. Extension towards the sides is actually pretty good. And then the bicep is also pretty generous as well. You can fully rotate 360 degrees in place. Once we get to the elbows, though, a humongous PSA that you may or may not have already seen on sites such as Reddit or even Twitter. And that is to definitely give not just Green Goblin here, but virtually every single No Way Home figure that has been released as part of this brand new wave, and either pour some hot water on it, dip it into a bowl of boiling water, or give it a pass on a high setting with a hair dryer, which is precisely what I did, because the elbow joints and the knee joints were completely frozen in place. And I know this is something that a lot of you have accepted as normal for Marvel Legends figures. But frankly, I don't give a shit. I frankly don't think that that's something that's an extra step that we should do. If anything, then okay, throw it up on the instructions. Or put like a little warning label on the packaging saying, oh, you know, joints might be stuck. Give it a pass with a hair dryer or some warm water. I'm sorry, but that's an extra step that is now a form of labor on the collector that shouldn't be the case if we're paying this amount of money, especially with the inflation that's going on with figures going on these days, especially on the Marvel Legends side of things. This is something that we shouldn't be doing ourselves. I'm sorry. I know that sounds entitled, but the fact that our preconceived notion is to be like, oh, let me pose it this way. Bam, broken joint. I've already seen a couple of posts from people for the No Way Home figures, whether it be Green Goblin or the Final Swing Tom Holland Peter Parker, where they have broken some of the legs and some of the joints because they're stuck thinking that, oh, this should be good right out of the box. This is Hasbro we're dealing with. No, man, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be an advocate for companies to take their time. And with these frozen joints, which came on my Green Goblin as well, I'm scared that they might have pushed a little too fast on this wave just so they can hit Christmas. Rant aside, and after finally giving it a pass with that hairdryer, both joints in the elbow are fully able to bend almost all the way up at that point right there. Just do be careful because even after passing it with the hairdryer, the cold, especially during this season, is able to make them stiff up a little bit once more, and therefore they do feel a little bit on the warpy side. So do be careful with your joints. I guess I'll go ahead and skip ahead just a little bit and say that the same thing could be said about the knee joints, which can be found right there. There's two that are technically able to fully bend all the way up, but they do stiffen up a little bit after they have cooled down from the warm temperatures. So do be careful, but they are a little bit ratcheted. They just have like these little secret points in there to be able to stay in place. Now, when it comes to the wrists, they technically do have hinge joints inside that are fully able to allow the wrist to rotate 360 degrees, and the hinge inside does allow the hand to bend inwards and outwards. However, I would argue that the right open hand, can do that much more favorably than that of the left. Even though it's technically the same joint, you are now dealing with the pop-out knife here that he has on the left gauntlet that kind of gets in the way, and thus making the effort to rotate this hand just a bit of a chore. You can technically still do it, but just know that you're at the risk of warping the knife that is right on the top part right here at any kind of extremity, because every time I try to rotate this hand, there goes the knife. I really don't want to risk breaking it, so you're kind of SOL. The waist joint is a little on the curious side because it does feel like there's some decent turning from side to side, but because of the way that it's molded and sculpted and glued together with the buckle and the strap, you're kind of stuck in a way where you can't really give it the full rotation, so you do have to be careful, but you can technically twist left and right on the mid-torso hinge, as well as being able to crunch inwards and upwards very generously, especially towards the back. You can see right there that he can actually flex pretty well towards the back side, and even a little bit of oblique crunching from side to side. No form of waist articulation. It does seem like this is all one solid joint. But then we get to the top legs, where not only you have the basic joint that allows the leg to move towards the front like so, and towards the sides in terms of extension, about that far, almost at the 180, but not fully there. And much like some other Marvel joints, or Marvel Legends joints at least, you do have a slight hinge effort happening here on the top legs that allows it to kind of flex and shrug upwards and downwards. I can't remember, somebody in the comment section in one of my older figures reviews for Marvel Legends did call out on this joint, calling it a specific name, but I honestly cannot remember at the top of my head right now. But that does allow some decent extension and movement towards the bottom and towards the top, like you see right there. Right below that, you do have, would you call it a thigh swivel if it's not fully in the thigh? But it's technically there, and it does allow full rotation 360. Just mind the extra elevated piece that you have right here as part of the molding. So when you rotate it in place, it's going to stop, but once you move the leg towards the front like so, you can then move the leg all the way around. So we were doing pretty decently with the articulation, but sadly we then get to these ankles. Yes, that's how strongly I feel about these stupid things, because we get that joint that Marvel Legends is known for having that I personally hate, and that's going to be this weird concoction that allows the foot to bend downwards and upwards pretty modestly, and it is slightly ratcheted. You can kind of feel it pop in place at different junctures. But when it comes to rotation, there's only pivoting. So you can only kind of rotate it and pivot it inwards and outwards like so, kind of at an angle, so to speak. And then when you move the foot all the way down, then it rotates. But it rotates, like I said, at that weird angle. And you can see that the entirety of the ankle is just sculpted as one big piece as part of the calf and the shin, as the whole lower leg. Now, with some Spideys in the past, with some other Marvel Legends figures that I haven't even covered on the channel that were these other characters like Black Panther and stuff like that I've been wanting to own. That bugged me, but I was like, okay, whatever. That's what they decided to do. With Green Goblin here, this is a major goddamn problem. Why? Because of the glider. That's why. This is the biggie. This is the monumental accessory that you need to then complete the overall illusion and mythos of the Green Goblin himself. He needs his glider, Hot Toys. Future review to be coming up very soon. He needs to be thrown in with the glider. And that's one of the things that I do commend on Marvel Legends, that they could have easily nickel and dime us by having the glider be sold separately, but he's simply just all one unit, all one SKU for $50. And so for $50, you're pretty much getting all of this. You get the 6-inch Willem Dafoe Green Goblin here from the final scene or the final climactic battle, the helmet, the pumpkin bomb, the hood, the goggles. But then you get the piece de resistance, which is going to be the glider. Overall, pretty happy with this glider, actually. I will admit that I gravitated towards it much more positively than I did with Norman himself, because overall, the sculpting and the paint application, especially with the texture work on the purple areas of the top of the glider, are really, really, really cool. And to scale as well. You even have some really robust building of the rubberized pieces here on the tips that feel pretty good. I mean, they don't feel as warpy as even the knives that are protruding out of his gauntlets. These actually feel much more solid. Kind of wish that we would have had a little bit of orange here to kind of resemble the pumpkin bombs that are usually forming, I guess you could say, the eyes at the top part here of the glider. But I know that technically this is a bit more screen accurate, I believe, for the final appearance of the glider towards the end of the movie, so it is what it is. I just feel like, as far as preference, I would have preferred pumpkin bombs here, even if they don't come out, just paint them on, but it is what it is. As you can see though, the rest of the actual paneling and the way that they were able to mold and sculpt this out, to me, is actually pretty cool. Then you get the engine underneath, where you have even more great texture work and, like I said, sculpting work happening with the piston areas here that make up the wings connected to then the middle engine. The missiles right here, which are made out of this I don't want to say flimsy, but bendy rubber. However, like I said, feels much more rigid than the pop-out knives that he has on his gauntlets. And so overall, I'm actually pretty happy with the design work of the main glider itself here. Even the engine is not only really well sculpted and well molded out, but you even have some accents of green happening inside of the little grill inside here in the middle part of the engine. You have a little bit of green right about right there, and then a little bit coming out of the pistons and the propulsion jets coming out here from the back. So that's pretty cool that they were able to kind of splash it a little bit. I'm still looking forward to seeing what modifiers and custom people can do with this glider, as far as giving it an added layer of chrome, some weathering, some battle damage. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to seeing some images pop up on Reddit of people that went the extra mile to give some new life to this form of glider, because the blueprint is definitely there and I feel like it's pretty solid. I just look forward to see what people can do to elevate it. And then when it comes to articulation, which is actually become a bit of a staple for the glider itself, because it's meant to be malleable. It's meant to be something a bit more on the athletic side of things, because it's meant to be ridden, and therefore the wings need to be able to move slightly. And overall, it's kind of okay. You have some decent articulation and mobility found here on the top part of the wing towards the outside here. You can see right there that it kind of flexes inwards and outwards, but it's not as flexible as I would have liked it. It's almost like it's just 2 degrees. You can see right there. It's pretty much just that. And that's it. Now, there is an added joint here that's pretty ratcheted and rigid that's connecting it to the engine. However, that one is just so rigid that you can hear right there, it just kind of pops. It kind of has like this tab that helps it lock in place, but it's just so durable that I'm almost kind of scared of breaking it. I'm like, I don't know in which direction it actually is meant to stop and where I can maybe push it to its limits. You know what I mean? Like, I always feel kind of insecure articulating it or moving it in any kind of direction that I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna stop. So you can kind of have it in that way. That's pretty much the extremity of where the wing can kind of go in that direction, versus having it lay completely flat like this wing is doing so right now. So I guess you can pose it a couple of different ways, but your permutations are not as extravagant as one would have you believe. And you even have further posability and articulation happening with the actual foot pedals here that can rotate and are actually somewhat ratcheted. They do require a little bit of assembly right out of the box. You actually have to take them out of the separate plastic casing, pop them on, and you're ready to go. But they are rotatable, I guess if that's even a word, and can kind of move at an angle up and down right about right there. And fitting Norman right on top is actually a pretty simple process. Obviously, just fit the foot right into the little loop, pop it into the peg via the hole on the ankle. Now, going back to those ankles, why is it problematic for this specific figure to have those ankles that I really dislike for Marvel Legends to do? Because in order to be agile and very, very poseable on that glider, I need to have those ankles a bit more articulated. They need to be able to rotate at the even 360 horizontally. They need to be a bit more flexible with the angles that I can put it at. And they're just so rigidly molded and sculpted that putting him on the glider is just the biggest pain in the ass. So many times I have to either be at a neutral standpoint where, yeah, I'm able to bounce him out by bending him a little bit at the knees, either crunching him inwards or upwards on the torso. But when it comes to the ankles, I really wish I could do some kind of leaning pose that he likes to do sometimes where he leans forward on the glider or does this and that. And it just doesn't work. Every time I have to have the glider at like an even plane to be able to get him standing out right. And maybe just kind of fake kind of like this flight pose by having him bend at the knees. And whenever I do try to get a little bit creative, he either falls off the glider or the foot pedals come off. The ones that have to be assembled, they simply just come off attached to the feet, and I have to start over again. And as an added bonus to help us swallow that $50 price tag, Marvel Legends threw in this translucent base, which is a little asymmetrically designed. You can see right there that one leg is kind of bigger than the others, but the longest leg with the little divots right here on the back is meant to be the one that has the top ball joint kind of at a L shape, or rather like a J shape, and that ball goes directly, or that ball peg goes directly into the socket right underneath the engine. So obviously, simply just fit it in. It actually fits pretty snug and tight. And while we're on the subject of snug and tight, you can actually take the pumpkin bomb and fit it into his open right hand, and it actually fits in there rather well, to the point where it doesn't feel loose at all. It actually can kind of just stay there. It literally snaps into place, and you can now pose him holding the pumpkin bomb like he's about to throw it. So kind of bringing everything together here into a nice little decorative set, you can then start to see that, okay, maybe $50 is not necessarily the worst price ever to pay for something like this. But at the same time, I don't feel like we need to pretend like all of Marvel Legends' sins have now been absolved, because there's still enough problems happening here with Marvel Legends No Way Home Green Goblin that I frankly feel a lot of people are ignoring. The stiff joints, the QC issues with my Norman head sculpt, the exposed neck when you swap out the masks. I just feel like there's some things here that could have maybe required some more time in the oven. But that's where my theory gets kind of brought into play, and that is that this was meant to come out at the beginning of next year, but a few of those, higher ups over at Hasbro said, we need to make that Christmas money, start dumping it now, accelerate production, and I fear that that's something that may have happened here with not just No Way Home Green Goblin, but practically the entirety of the wave. And I kind of have a little bit much more anxiety than I do excitement when I finally get around to reviewing the 3 Spideys, the other extra figures, Doc Ock when he finally gets shipped out. And much like the actual film, Spider-Man No Way Home, I had to have my moments where I had to kind of push myself away and think to myself, am I really digging this figure because of the figure's generally good, or is it simply just nostalgia speaking to me because this is the Green Goblin that I grew up with? Finally, taking an awful lot of the objective problems I had with the figure into consideration, I'd say this is still a really good figure, and $50 is not the worst price, but I still think that there could have been some wiggle room either for added paint decals, some quality control, some better joints, especially more so on the glider so that then his footing could be a little bit more even, because at times it could be a tremendous pain in the ass to try to get them to be situated promptly on the glider and get them into some cool poses. But that's more than what I can say for the Hot Toys, just a little bit of foreshadowment there. And as such, this is probably the more affordable way to get yourself a Willem Dafoe Green Goblin without having to pay abhorrent scalper prices for an old school 2002 Toy Biz figure. Just take into consideration that some people out there are being just a little hyperbolic for this current Marvel Legends Green Goblin. I myself still consider it a good enough figure to give it a 7 out of 10. May not be the most popular opinion out there right now as far as Marvel Legends, but hey, I've practically been doing that all this year, right? So now I want to hear from you guys. Have you had any luck finding any of the No Way Home figures that have just barely been released? I know that officially, like I said, it was supposed to come out next year, but then the street date got pushed to like November 26th. They're starting to trickle out there in stores. Some pre-orders are barely managing to get shipped out. I'm managing to get myself some from either Entertainment Earth and Amazon. There are going to be affiliate links if by some chance you do want to give a shot at trying to pick them up using those links in the description that help the channel and you get yours in the process. But otherwise, these are just my opinions for the current time being. Now, for those of you who do have some of these figures in your possession, let me know what you guys think thus far of this No Way Home wave. Do you think it's been rushed, or is it adequately made for what you perceived it to be, or what you anticipated the wave to be, to meet that price tag that they're going for? I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say because, like I said, my opinion wasn't necessarily the most popular, but that's what makes that aspect of this particular hobby very, very interesting. And if you guys enjoyed the review, hit the thumbs up button. If you did not, which I'm certain some of you didn't, that's okay. Hit the thumbs down button if you need to do so. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you guys later.